My girlfriend was raped while cheating on me. I'm lost on what steps to take next. I've been sitting here for like 15 minutes, trying to figure out how to start this. My head is completely spinning, and my thoughts are just all over the place. I guess I'll start with the backstory. I've been dating Sarah for just under 2 years now. She has a close friend, John, whom she's known since she was a child. I never liked him. He was always a little creepy, blatantly flirted with Sarah throughout our relationship, and made occasional passes that made me uncomfortable. So, cut to about 2 weeks back, Sarah and I were invited to a gathering party by a mutual friend. I had a workshop for work that night, so I couldn't attend. With the current circumstances, I was never inclined to go anyway. I didn't want Sarah to go either, but she was very adamant, and I guess I just didn't want an argument, so I said, fine. We ended up running into John later that day, and he mentioned the same party, asking if we had been invited as well. My girlfriend told him she was going, but that I wasn't. He got this weird smile on his face and said something like, "If you're going, I guess I have to go." Just something about his smile and the way he said it really rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't want to be possessive, but the idea of the two of them together all night at a party didn't sit well with me. After we got back to our apartment, I told her a bit more firmly this time that I wasn't comfortable with her going to the party, especially with him there. She told me I was overreacting and shut down the conversation. I'm sure most of you can figure out where this is going. I went to the workshop and she went to the party. It got to be like 2 a.m., and she hadn't gotten home, nor was she answering my calls. Naturally, I was incredibly worried. About an hour later, one of her friends called me and told me she was found unconscious at the party and driven to the hospital. She was raped by John. After spending 2 days, including that night, at the hospital and talking with the police, I took her home. She told me John drugged her and dragged her upstairs, where it happened in one of the bedrooms. As the party was at his very large place, she was an absolute mess. She didn't want to go outside, wasn't eating, and had terrible nightmares. I did everything I could to comfort her through this process. I was devastated for her and hated to see her like this. But, and I know this makes me sound like a terrible person, I don't blame her for John assaulting her, but I couldn't get the fact that I tried more than once to dissuade her from going to the party, specifically saying that her being with John made me uncomfortable, out of my head. I feel I could have done more to protect her, and she should have listened to how I felt. Important side note, it turns out John is literal living garbage. After her assault, we both felt it was best to get justice. There were drugs in her system and all the physical indications. We immediately filed a restraining order, and the police opened an investigation. Within the span of a week, after news had gotten around, 2 other girls came forward with similar encounters with John. So the guy is basically a serial rapist. Cut to now, my girlfriend is still in no better shape than she was 2 weeks ago. She gets panic attacks out of nowhere, she's lost like 15 pounds, and absolutely refuses to leave our apartment, even to seek therapy. I was committed to taking care of her and being there for her, but I got a call from one of my close friends, Sam, this morning. It was a long conversation, but it basically boiled down to him, as well as many others at the party that night, seeing Sarah flirting with John at the beginning of the party. According to him and people he had been talking to, she was at the very least matching, if not being the initiator in these exchanges with John. He also recounts that she wasn't blackout drunk or seemingly that out of it, and worst of all, many saw her holding John's hand and taking him upstairs. At this point, I feel like I want to vomit. He told me he wanted the situation to cool down a bit before telling me, and was going to tell me after the party what happened. But with her being taken to the hospital under the circumstances, he didn't feel it was the right time. I decided not to assume anything and asked her about the specifics of what happened that night. She tried to tell me the same thing, that she was drugged and dragged to a bedroom. But when I told her what Sam had told me, the color completely drained from her face. She started to panic, and I did my best to calm her down, but it was at least 30 minutes before she could catch her breath to speak. She was sobbing, but she was coherent enough to understand and basically confessed to cheating on me. She said she was drunk and hadn't been out for so long that she wanted some adventure. She admitted she was the one who took John to the bedroom and wasn't dragged there against her will. She kept apologizing and saying it was a terrible mistake, and that nothing else was a lie, he did rape her. I believe the last part. As far as I can understand now, it was when they were in the bedroom fooling around that he slipped something into her or something like that, then he forced himself on her. I don't know what to do anymore. She was raped, but to me, everything before that was her still intending to cheat and actively cheating on me. I am devastated, and I don't even want to look at her right now. I left the apartment and am currently at Sam's house. I don't know anything anymore. She lost her job due to COVID, and I pay the rent for the apartment where her name isn't on the lease, as well as groceries. She's become completely emotionally dependent on me these past few weeks. If I did break up with her, she would have nowhere to go, and as much as I resent her, I don't want something terrible happening to her. Please help. I need advice. I don't know what to do. Edit. There's been a lot of responses in a short time, so I thought it would be best to address some things here. First off, I've been made aware that 2 posts of somewhat similar situations have been posted to this sub in the past 2 weeks or so. I don't know what I could post here to prove this is true without exposing my privacy, so I'm sorry, but all I can do is give you my word. I'm just here looking for advice. I don't think this is something someone should be fantasizing about for a karma farm. It's completely upended my life. Second thing is people questioning Sarah's account of the events. I didn't include every detail because I'm just trying to get my thoughts out. But her story matches the other 2 women who came forward in terms of the pattern of John's behavior. The 2 other women were also initially in a consensual environment before he drugged them and assaulted them. From what they've said and posted, a large part of the reason they didn't come forward was because it started as consensual, and they thought that would make them not be believed. I also didn't want to get too graphic, but the nature of Sarah's assault was very violent, something most anybody would not consent to. So that may be why he drugs them first as well. She had, and still has, traces of large bruises around her neck and other parts of her body, as well as scratches and gashes. I don't really doubt at all that she was indeed assaulted. The drug found in her system was ketamine. While Sarah did enjoy partying, she never did anything harder than weed. Third, Sarah has been living abroad for school since starting college. Her parents have been made aware of the situation, but coming from a very religious background, while concerned for her well-being, they aren't exactly being supportive nor have put in the effort to come see her. She never had many close friends for as long as I've known her, other than John. I don't know where she would go if I told her she couldn't stay at my apartment. Update. I needed some time to sort out the situation, but I did read most, if not all, of the replies I could, and I appreciate all the advice and messages, especially from those who had been put in similar situations as I. I guess I should start by clearing a few things up. First off, to everyone who thought my story had holes in it, it definitely did, and I'm sorry for that. At the time, and even now, I was missing a lot of information, and was filling in holes as best I could with what I had. I also didn't want the post to get too long, so I left out information that I guess would have painted a better picture of my situation. I'll try my best to include those missing details. If you're just interested in the update, skip down a few paragraphs. So, details about John. He is part of Sarah and my social circle and lives quite close to us. Some of the behavior from John towards Sarah that made me uncomfortable throughout our relationship included constantly making comments about her body, putting his arm around her every chance he could, asking her to go with him on a trip to Europe last summer, just the 2 of them, poking her breasts when she was wearing tight clothing, and saying things like, "I'm lucky I met her when I did," or "she would have been with me by now," etc. It wasn't any one thing, but the accumulation of everything that made me uncomfortable with her spending a lot of time with him. She never encouraged his behavior, at least when I was around, but she didn't actively discourage it either, despite me openly talking to her about my boundaries. She just brushed it off as them knowing each other for so long and being comfortable with one another. A few smaller details I guess are relevant. 1. We are not in the US. COVID, while still obviously an issue in our country, is relatively under control in our area. And everyone going to the party Sarah attended was part of our larger social circle. It was at a large condo a friend of ours was renting for the summer. It wasn't some open invite party with 100+ people. Still, dumb, I know. There were 30-ish, maybe 40 people there, so in hindsight, yeah, no one should have been at the party to begin with. Lastly, to clear up both Sarah's and my financial situation, I am lucky enough to have my parents paying for my tuition, whatever scholarships didn't cover, so I can focus my resources on just day-to-day living costs, like rent, groceries, etc. Sarah, on the other hand, was pretty much thrown to the wolves after finishing high school. Her parents, like I stated in my edit, are very religious and very controlling, so they told Sarah they were only going to pay for her schooling if she went to a local college. She refused and came to my school. She lived in residence for her first 2 years, which was covered by financial aid. I got my apartment about a year ago, and with COVID and her not wanting to go back home, we decided it would be best if she moved in with me. Her finances are basically completely tied up in tuition and student loans, so I offered to keep paying full rent despite her living with me full-time. Actual update, oh boy. I wish I could say things have gotten clearer in the past week, but honestly, it's been a total clusterfuck, and it's only gotten worse. I spent a few days at Sam's, reaching out to friends, trying to get a clearer picture of what happened that night before going back to talk to Sarah. I got told the same story multiple times, that she was the one who started flirting with John and led him upstairs. I should say right now that in my first conversation with Sarah, when I confronted her, she didn't explicitly say she had intended to sleep with him that night, she just confirmed that she took him upstairs. She was basically having a panic attack throughout the entire conversation, so I had a hard time pushing for clarity. By this point, in my heart, I was trying to find any excuse at all for her to save our relationship. But my mind was telling me that the relationship was over, at least for the time being. But as many of you commented, despite my obvious grief over losing a 2-year relationship, I decided I'd be willing to let her stay in my apartment, again, rent-free, until at least the end of October, to sort out other living arrangements and support. I called her about 3 days after staying at Sam's, and told her I'm willing to listen to her side of the story, but I need the complete truth about everything, and she agreed. So, I went back to my apartment later that evening. We sat down, and I asked her about what really happened that night. She started crying right away, but not panicking, and told me she had to tell me something about herself. Sarah has always been into the partying scene more than me. I've never really been comfortable around drugs in that environment in general, but I went with her anyway about once a month or so. She, on the other hand, would have girls' nights out and parties pretty much every weekend. Right at the beginning of our relationship, I told her I wasn't really comfortable being with someone who was involved with hard drug use. My brother has a history of addiction, and I've seen what it can do to somebody and the people around them. She told me that's fine since she only drinks and smokes weed occasionally. Well, it turns out that for about a year now, she had started doing harder drugs at parties when I wasn't there. And her girls' nights were often just her and some people from our social circle, John included, going to a friend's apartment to do shrooms. I was shocked, to say the least, and I didn't even know what to think in that moment. I just tried to ask her more about what happened on the night she was assaulted, and if she intended to cheat on me that night. She came clean and told me she did lead John upstairs, but swore she wasn't trying to sleep with him, she just wanted drugs. He told her it was cocaine, but obviously, it was not, since only fentanyl and alcohol showed up in her system at the hospital. She told me he immediately started coming on to her, but she tried to fight him off. Eventually, though, she was too drugged out to fight back. After consoling her for a while, I asked her what her relationship with John was really like before, and if they did anything together before what happened that night. She admitted that they made out a few times before, around Christmas last year, but promised it didn't go any further than that. She was begging me to forgive her, saying she needs me in her life and that she was just in a rebellious phase because of her upbringing. I didn't know what to believe anymore, and still don't, to be honest. I was completely overwhelmed by everything, so I told her I needed to clear my head and left again. Sam was nice enough to let me stay at his place again. I talked to some of my friends she said she was doing substances with, and they confirmed it. I was pretty upset at them for hiding it from me, but they told me she basically forced them to keep it a secret from me. It feels like so much of my relationship was a lie. She wasn't the person I thought she was, and she lied constantly for who knows how long. At this point, my mind was basically made up, so I called her and told her it's over. But she can stay at my apartment until the end of October, only if she finds a therapist and gets help during that time. She basically lost it during the call, but my mind was made up, so I just said I'd be staying at Sam's for a while and hung up. I wish that was the last of the shit that happened, but literally a day after that, I started getting spammed with hate messages and calls from friends, relatives, and people I don't even know. It turns out she posted all over social media about how I was breaking up with her because she was raped and was kicking her out with nowhere to go in these COVID times. She also wrote that I've been emotionally abusing her after her assault, victim blaming her, and stopping her from getting a therapist. I'm completely lost. I'm furious, heartbroken. I can't even describe all the emotions I felt. I called her again that night and told her she has 2 weeks to move out now, and I don't want to hear from her again. I've had to spend the past week playing damage control, trying to clear my name on social media, calling friends and family. I was ostracized by coworkers, though luckily my boss was on my side. I was getting doxxed, receiving death threats, my life basically fell apart. Sam, thank God, was completely understanding through all of this and said I could stay at his place until Sarah moved out. She's moving out on Friday, but I don't want to go back to that apartment anymore. I've had to cut out friends, my reputation is now in the garbage, and I lost the first and only person I've ever loved. I don't know anymore. I low-key want to die, but I'll find a therapist sooner or later. I just feel numb to everything. I don't even know if I'm right or wrong in this situation anymore. I hope I haven't rambled on too much. I know this post is really long, but thank you, really, to everyone who showed support in the last post. It meant a lot. Edit. Someone's comment made me realize she was still lying to me. The second time I talked to her, she changed her story about what she was drugged with, and I didn't even realize. I was not told by the hospital what she had in her system, and I'm not very knowledgeable about substances in general. All the information I had came from Sarah. I don't even know if she was drugged against her will at all at this point. God, I'm doubting everything now. This is not the person I thought she was. I don't even care. She's out of my life now.